Well, good evening and welcome to Merit TV Canada. My name is David Craig. Happy Friday as we move into the weekend. Hope you're going to have just a fantastic evening. Want to bring you some of the updates that's happened this week in Canada, culture and politics as we are moving on from Canada's election and as we are moving on to watching Mark Carney and his government and how they perform. A couple of things I do want to highlight in a couple moments. And just a reminder, we do have Candice Bergen, former leader of the opposition, former leader of the Conservative Party and MP. She'll be joining me in just a couple minutes as we dive into all things the Conservative Party, what they're doing to move forward. It'd be really great to hear from her. But a couple thoughts that I have been working on and wanting to think through is this idea of unity. And this came yesterday. We had Peter Stauffer, who's a former NDP MP out of Eastern Canada, brought up the idea of unity and unifying. And I think at times we can use this word vaguely. We can use this idea with the sentiment of unity is a good thing and we need to unify as Canadians. Even in the face of, you look at Quebec separatism over the years. You look at the idea of Alberta gaining their independence and having more control and more autonomy, in some instances actually fully separating from Canada. This idea of unity is getting tougher and tougher to maybe grasp, or maybe it's of a goal that seems to be getting further away. I want to talk about what do we mean by unity, because I read an interesting thought earlier today about the differences between unity and alliances. And you look out throughout history and you look at the idea of World War II, you look at different major conflicts that were settled. They weren't settled out of unity. They actually were settled out of an alliance. An alliance is a shared common goal that we are striving to achieve. And I'm wondering if we as Canadians need to change our language in the sense of, we obviously, unity sounds like a great idea, but what does it actually mean? Because Canada is very diverse. We've got different pockets, we have different cultures, we have different religions within this nation that we call Canada. We aren't going to quote unquote unify on every single thing. We aren't going to see eye to eye because of different walks of life. What has influenced us, our nature and nurture, those things in terms of influence how we look. So maybe I'm posing the question, maybe unity isn't the goal. Maybe strategic alliances are. One, for example, could be that we create an alliance across Canada for the economic output of Canada to increase dramatically. And then we start answering the question, how do we do that? How do we raise that in our country? If we can come to an alliance where all provinces are committed to growth, committed to the economics and our economy, not just changing direction, but accelerating forward. Now that's something I think a lot of Canadians can get behind and saying we can work towards this common goal. Or an alliance of how do we make sure that our healthcare systems in each province and across our country are actually working where it's meeting the needs of Canadians, not to the point where we have to go to other countries to get some serious surgeries done, or the wait times are too long just to see an expert. That's an alliance that we can get around. This idea of unity, I think, a lot of times spreads much deeper than individual goals. Unity means that we're all on the same level. And I want to propose the idea, maybe there are just strategic things that we need to include in our language of what are we going to make an alliance on. An alliance that there needs to be respect between federal and provincial powers. Get back to a properly functioning federation where you have, yes, separation of powers, and those gray areas where there's overlap that Ottawa isn't going to be taking advantage of what some things that should fall or could fall under provincial jurisdiction. Maybe there's an alliance that Ottawa tries to stay out as much as it can outside the business of provinces, except for in the areas that are specifically outlined, or we need to relook at what those are. The reason why I'm going down this route is I don't want the language. Language can often be a barrier when we communicate. We say certain words, but they mean different things to different people. Unity might mean something different to Albertans who want to leave. Alliances might be a different angle in terms of what can we build an alliance on. I think this is an important thing, that a message for Prime Minister Mark Carney in his language as he continues to meet with the province leaders and Danielle Smith, and even as there's other groups, as Danielle Smith, Premier of Alberta, has mentioned that she's willing to walk out the path if there's enough citizens that form this group that want to entertain a referendum for maybe separation or more independence or autonomy from Ottawa. I want to include this idea of what things can we strategically align on. This is very important. I hope that is something that you can consider as we are walking through, because I think that we can find a lot of wins, not to unify Canada. in the sense that we're all going to be on the same page for everything, because that will never happen. But we can get an alliance and be aligned on specific issues, specifically the economy and a couple other key ones that actually make life better for us and our future generations. That's it for tonight's thought on that. One other quick update, which I thought was interesting that's happening as of today, is the NDP is petitioning Mark Carney to retain their official party status, even though they lost their official party status by only claiming 7 seats in the House of Commons. They have now lost it and they are independents, but they are wanting to petition Mark Carney to grant them official party status. Is this slightly bending the rules? The question I have is, what's the point of a rule when you change it if it's not in your convenience, if it doesn't work for you when you actually fall through it? I think that we need to keep it as it is. And what it does, I think it helps bring and represent Canadians. I know there's probably 1 million people that voted for NDP, but this is something that I think we do need to stick to because it shows a certain level and threshold in order to be an official party in Canada. That's it for now. We're going to be back right after this break with Candice Bergen. Welcome back to Merit TV Canada's Election Watch. My name is David Craig. I am happy to be joined today by Candice Bergen, former leader of the Conservatives, the former leader of the opposition, as well as MP. Candice, thank you so much for joining us today.
Great to be with you, David.
First and foremost, the most important question, how are you feeling about your Winnipeg Jets as we are towards Canadian hockey and playoffs?
Very excited. I mean, what a comeback last Sunday, and we're all watching and praying and hoping for the best. So no, it's very exciting. A fun time to be a Jets fan.
It is a fun time. It's my hometown, and I could not believe the game, and they scored with 1.6 seconds. Anyways, I wanted to start off that way because I know you are a big Winnipeg Jets fan, and they got a big game this evening. So
that's right. No, glad you did. That it's on our minds, definitely.
Well, lots has been going on over the course of the last week and a half since Canada went to the polls on April 28th. Prime Minister Mark Carney is now formed government with the Liberals and a minority government. And we know some obviously big headlines of Pierre Poilievre losing his seat in Carleton, and there'll be a by-election coming up. I want to start off with Andrew Scheer. He has been moved back into a position that he is familiar with. He has been in this position before. You have worked very closely with him over the years. Can you talk us through him being the interim leader of the opposition and the Conservatives until, I guess, the by-election happens? And what does that look like for the Conservative Party?
Sure. And you know what? I'm glad for the chance because I think a lot of people don't quite understand this, and understandably so. This really for Andrew is more of a kind of a functionary duty that's needed. So it's really more about when you're in the House of Commons, there has to be somebody leading the party in the House of Commons to sign off on all of the staffing, the offices, all of the legal things that have to be done. That's literally what this position is for Andrew. He is, I'm pretty certain he will remain House Leader, and that's an important role. So he is going to just be doing the legalities of being the leader of the official opposition. Make no mistake, Pierre Poilievre is the leader of the party. He will be leading the charge. He'll be spending time in Ottawa. I'm fairly certain he still has his office as leader of the official opposition. Andrew will not be taking that over. This will just be Andrew doing the technical legal duties of the leader of the official opposition until Pierre is elected and gets the seat again in the House of Commons. But, you know, some people have been making a lot of it like, oh, Andrew Scheer's leader again. He is not leader in really the sense of the word as we understand it.
So in traditional duties that leaders have, like when it comes to politics and uniting the party and providing a vision going forward. So you're saying it's purely in function to maintain the legalities and perform the legalities that have to happen. How does that come about in terms of, is that, does a party have to vote on this? Is that a behind the scenes conversation? Hey, you're going to take this over until, how does that happen?
Well, my understanding is caucus voted on it, and caucus, that's sort of, again, the legal way. You know, I'm sure Pierre's happy with that. He understands how Andrew works. They've worked very closely together. As I said, Andrew will continue to be House Leader, which is tied in very closely to what Pierre is doing. But, you know, you nailed it, David. It'll be Pierre setting that vision, working with the team to lay out how they're going to be approaching the speech from the throne and what's happening over the next few weeks. So, yeah, the caucus would have come together. I believe it was this past Tuesday. they would have voted and chosen Andrew as the opposition leader. And the caucus understands full well what that means, and that it is in no way anybody taking over Pierre's role. Pierre remains the leader in every sense of the word.
Yeah, thank you for the clarity. I think that's important to understand as well.
Yeah.
How it works
Yeah.
in this process before the by-election. Let's shift to Pierre Poilievre and the by-election. As he did lose his seat, I know there's several factors that went into him losing his seat during the election in Carleton, Canada. And I want to get your perspective first before we get to the details of the by-election. But there's been some criticism in the sense of he lost the seat and now he's going to be taking on another seat. I'd love to hear it from your perspective as a former leader of the opposition, a Conservative Party member as well. What are your thoughts in terms of you have a strong leader like Pierre who really progressed the Conservative Party forward in this election? People might label it as a failure because they didn't form government, but there's still, I think it's 25 seats that were added. The amount of votes were there. You give it any other year as well, the way that they're polling and the votes came in, you're forming government. Even you look in the Harper era, Justin Trudeau in 2015, even Chrétien in I think it was 2004, they were all around the same numbers. So my point in saying that, from a Conservative perspective, is there any controversy within the party or within the group of him having to take up another seat to maintain his leadership? General thoughts on that?
No, I agree with you. I mean, I think everybody was shocked and saddened, and it was a kind of a wake up call in a sense when Pierre lost his riding. It wasn't anything to just go, not a big deal. It's a big deal when the leader loses his own riding. Mm-hmm. But the support for Pierre in caucus, and I believe amongst the membership, is there 100%. The membership, we understand exactly what Pierre was able to accomplish, the support that he built. And the majority, I haven't heard nobody say they want to see Pierre go, nor do we want another leadership race. So I think there is some desire for some adjustments. You know, anytime, whether it's in business or in life, and certainly in politics, when you lose an election, you need to make some adjustments and show the people that are supporting you and around you in the closest way that you're able to make those adjustments, that you're able to learn and grow. And I believe that Pierre is doing that. Then in our democracy, we do have the ability for a member of parliament to step down and a by-election to be called, and Pierre run in that by-election and gain a seat. So if ever there was a reason to do it, this is a reason. You know, it's not, we saw the Liberals do it. We saw Carolyn Bennett step down before an election. She didn't need to. She stepped down so she could go get a nice position as an ambassador. Mm-hmm. There was virtually no criticism of her doing that, and it triggered a by-election. This by-election is so that the leader of the official opposition, in the spirit of that word, and soon to be by the letter of the law as well, he needs a seat. So Damien Kirk is stepping down. Pierre's going to run in that election. I believe he will win and get back to the House of Commons. And you know, I've got to give credit to Mark Carney. He said he's not going to play games with that. He's not going to extend that. He has latitude in how long he has to call it. He's not going to use that. He's just going to call the by-election. And I've got to give credit to him for doing that.
Yeah, I have to give credit there as well. That was, I thought, a mature move. I thought it was, it's a good move just to say we're not going to mess around and play games with you guys. And obviously, I think there's a certain amount of respect for what Pierre has obviously done with the party. Let's move to the by-election. Can you give us some of the details coming up? Do we have dates of when it's going to happen? What could the timing look like? And also, what does it look like leading up to this by-election for the Conservative Party and also for MPs? Because I'm glad you brought up Damien Kirk. He willingly stepped down from his seat to promote and to be able to give it up for Pierre Poilievre. I'll make a note a little bit different than Mark Carney and what happened with the existing MP that was in his area. He ran. There wasn't as a willingness to step down from that spot. You can read that as you may. But there obviously was this willingness for Damien Kirk to say, Pierre, take my spot. What has to be done over the course of the next weeks, months, and what does the timing look like before the by-election happens? I believe it's in Battle River, Crowfoot here in Alberta.
Right. Well, interestingly, there are a few technical things that do have to happen. So Damien actually can't step down because technically what's called the writ. So after every election, Elections Canada has to send the writ to the House of Commons. That usually takes 2 or 3 weeks. Then there has to be a swearing in. So for sure, Damien has to wait until his writ is returned to the House of Commons. I don't know, he might have to swear in and then he can resign. Like he has to be a member of parliament. then he can step aside, which then starts the timeline for a by-election. And technically, the prime minister has 6 months before he even has to call it. And then I believe he then would have another 6 months for it to happen. So technically, if Carney wanted to play games, Prime Minister Carney, this could be extended a long time. Again, he has said he wouldn't do that. So we'll see. When Damien's writ is returned, he goes through what he needs to in order to become, again, a member of parliament. Then he steps down, triggering that by-election. We'll see what Prime Minister Carney does, and then we'll know better in terms of the timeline.
What are your thoughts on with regards to the by-election? And obviously with Pierre's riding during the election, there's been a lot of I guess controversy around the 91 candidates that were on his ballot. In my riding, I had 5 to choose from. 91 is absurd. Anywhere you go across Canada, there's obviously a group, and a group I believe has come out and claimed and said that I was there, they're working. And they've also put forward, I forget what the group's name is off the top of my head, but they want to do a similar thing for this by-election, at least for what I've been seeing. I've also seen Maxime Bernier, leader of the PPC, stating either, I'm not sure if he was going to run or get one of his members to run against Pierre. What are your makings on this is a by-election that's going to be highly watched, obviously, because of the status of Pierre Poilievre. What are your thoughts when it comes to some of those irregularities or those, you can call them loopholes, or maybe there's just, it's not a very good fence to create an opportunity for this to do well? Thoughts on that?
Well, every time when I ran, and this was the law up until I believe 2017, maybe 2019, anybody who wanted to run in a federal election had to put a financial deposit down. I think it might have been $1,000. I can't remember. It wasn't 10,000, but it wasn't just $25. That was enough to just ensure there was some sense of seriousness. And remember, in Elections Canada, you can't just take money from anybody. So if somebody wants to put their name on the ballot or wanted to prior to 2017, they had to at least put some money where their mouth was. And they weren't going to get that back unless they received a certain percentage of the vote. The Liberals changed that. And so all you need now is, I believe, 100 signatures from people within your riding. And they can be, the same people can sign the same forms. So you think about this, 100 people can decide to run. They can all sign each other's forms. Boom, there's 100 people on the ballot. It's ridiculous, frankly, and it needs to be changed. Now, do the Liberals have an interest in changing it? I don't know. It worked for them against Pierre. I think that was part of the reason that Pierre lost in his own riding. I don't see it having the same effect in Damien's riding, but we don't know. And at the end of the day, it's goofy. Okay, let's call it what it is. It's goofiness, and it has no place in Canada's elections. So I certainly hope that, again, Mark Carney has shown a bit of seriousness. I hope he sees it and says, okay, this is an unintended consequence. We don't want barriers for people to run, but we also don't want frivolous and these kinds of obnoxious things. So Pierre's going to have to keep an eye on it, definitely. It's regrettable in the election campaign that this wasn't really taken seriously. There could have been things done to help ensure that Pierre won in Carleton. Yeah. But at the same time, there were a lot of things going on. But yeah, it's crazy, David. And I think the Liberals need to clean this up.
Well, I think at the very least, Elections Canada, we need to have a look at what are the procedures and the processes, because during the election, they were stating everything's fine. But then now after the fact, they've come out with several irregularities that's been going on, some different looseness, you can call it, in terms of how the election. I'm not on the page of at all that election, that there's mass wide voter fraud going on that but there are things that we can clean up and make it tighter in probably the most consequential thing that we do as Canadians when we vote for our leadership and our government.
Yeah. Well, another area, if I can just quickly point out, and I know Elections Canada has kind of dismissed this, but I've heard it from people who know it's true, where there were non-citizens voting, and not that they were going and voting in they were trying to dupe the system. In the case that I know about, when I know the individual, she didn't know she wasn't supposed to vote as a non-citizen. And she went and voted because all she needed was her driver's license. And it was after the fact where she went, oh my gosh, I committed an offense, because actually you're not supposed to vote if you're not a citizen. But there is no mechanism. And so if somebody or a group of people wanted to take advantage of that, there is a loophole in the system for that as well that needs to be cleaned up.
Yeah, I've heard some interesting stories, similar people I know with similar stories that, and one of them was her husband and wife's name were actually already crossed out when they went to vote, meaning they'd already been counted for voting. And again, little things will happen when you're trying to have millions and millions of people vote. But anyways, we have 1 minute left, Candice. Just wanted
Sure.
general thoughts on Prime Minister Mark Carney's first week and a half, but specifically, he had a big meeting with President Donald Trump. He ran on anti-Trump sentiment throughout his campaign. I'm interested on your take on their meeting and thoughts of how it went.
Well, listen, I thought his approach was the right one. I thought it looked like a fairly good meeting for part of it. Two observations though that one is factual. It was not the Mark Carney that was not the relationship he presented to Canadians. He said Trump was a threat to us, elbows up. Trump was basically at our border, just trying and waiting to take over our water and our energy. And then he said, President Trump is a transformational leader. I'm thinking I'm just going to quote Prime Minister Carney from now on. Oh, you don't like Trump? Well, apparently he's a transformational leader. So that's observation number one. But I'll tell you something else I noticed. When Donald Trump disrespected and diminished Chrystia Freeland, who I don't defend, I would never run on the same ticket as she was. We're on totally different angles politically. But Mark Carney is her leader. He signed her nomination papers. She's probably going to be sworn into cabinet in a capacity next week. And I think she's the godmother of his kids, or vice versa. He said not one word to defend her.
Interesting.
I really, to me, that speaks loudly. There were things he could have said to defend his colleague, the person he's going to be serving with, and somebody I think he calls a friend. Yeah. I found that disheartening.
It's a great observation that I think that went unnoticed for a lot of people, especially as a leader. And if you have a member of your team, you're going to bat for your team for sure. But Candice, thank you so much. We're out of time today, but I really appreciate your thoughts and joining us. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
We'll be back right after this. Welcome back to Merit TV Canada. Just had a great chat with former leader of the opposition, a former leader of the Conservatives, Candice Bergen. As you know, she is a big Jets fan. So game's on right now. Go Jets, go. We're cheering for Canadian teams, but specifically Winnipeg. I'm not sure if you knew this, but it's my hometown. So very happy to cheer for the Jets. A little easier when the Flames aren't even in the playoffs. Anyways, let's keep rolling. Is that lots to think about with what she is saying. I thought she had some fair points about the distinction between Andrew Scheer as the interim leader of the party in function to make sure that the party can operate as it needs to until Pierre Poilievre runs in the by-election. But he is maintaining the leadership, setting the pace, the vision, the direction for the whole party. It's great to hear that behind the party. It seems like there is complete unity on this idea and understanding as they walk through this. Be watching for the by-election. It's going to be extremely closely watched, this by-election. It's going to be all eyes on it as the leader of the official opposition, a leader that was very close to becoming prime minister this past election, is going to be running for a seat as he lost his seat in Carleton, Canada over in Ottawa. But now he is moving into Alberta to be able to take a seat, and Damien Kirk has willingly stood down and said that he can run in my riding because he obviously believes in that leader. So be watching for that. Be watching for maybe some of the controversy that's around Elections Canada, as there was 91 people who were on the ballot in Carleton. Are there going to be a long list of people in this in Pierre Poilievre's potentially new riding of Battle River Crowfoot? Because there's a group stating that they're going to try to do that. Also on watch is the PPC. Maxime Bernier is putting out comments. I'm not sure whether he's going to run or if he's going to have someone from his party run in that area against Pierre Poilievre. Be interesting to see how that unfolds. Lots going on as we watch Prime Minister Mark Carney continue to operate and form government. Thank you for joining us this evening at Merit TV Canada. Have a good evening.